Well, you met Teller as a teenager,
Yeah.
but it wasn't until 1975 that you guys actually had your first show together at the Renaissance Fair?
Yeah. Teller and I met when I was 16, I guess, 17. I bought a stereo from a guy at a hi-fi store in Greenfield. And he was a graduate of Amherst College, and he was doing odd classical music performances, very weird comedy and avant-garde music, with a group he called the Otmar Memorial Society for the Preservation of Unusual and Disgusting Music. And he knew Teller from college. Teller had graduated and was teaching high school Latin and Greek in New Jersey, right outside of Trenton. And as a matter of fact, Jon Stewart was signed up for his class when Teller left to work with me. So Jon Stewart, the first time he interviewed us, said, you know, I was supposed to be in Mr. Teller's introduction to Latin class, and now here we are on TV talking about it. But so Teller and I met. I was juggling plungers, you know, and throwing them and having them stick to a board while the orchestra played Cacciatorian saber dance. And I was 17, and Teller was reciting poetry in Latin that he'd written. And we started talking. And because even though juggling and magic are diametrically opposed, right? Juggling, you say, I can do this, and you can. Magic, you say, I can do this, and you can't. You know, in magic, you're simply lying. In juggling, you're simply telling the truth. We started talking, and our talks were entirely intellectual and theoretical. This is what magic could be in theory. Teller and I have always been, disgustingly, sickeningly pretentious. We always start with the idea at the highest level and then say, you know, can we do a card trick that deals with this? And so Teller and I talked about like that. And when I was hitchhiking around, every time I swung through Jersey, I would stop and, you know, Teller and I would go out, have some supper, you know, when I was practicing juggling all the time. And we talked more and more and more. And in 1975, a guy that I'd gone to college with was booking a Renaissance Festival in Minnesota. And he said, you know, I like your street act. I want to put it in the Renaissance Festival. And I said, what the fuck? I'm going to wear tights? He said, yeah. And I went, Jesus. And I said, oh, you know, can I just do my show the way I do it? And he said, yeah. We just need some people who can really gather a crowd and do stuff. Because I could work for like 500 people outdoors on the street, you know? That's why my voice sounds like this. And I said to him, you know, there's this magician I've been talking to a lot, and he's doing shows around Jersey, because Teller was doing shows, you know, like you do when you've got one job and you do art on the side. He was teaching during the day and then doing magic shows, you know, on weekends and stuff. And I thought he was really good. And so I said to the guy who was booking me in Minnesota, I said, I got this magician that I think you should also book. And he said, well, you know, I'm kind of out of my budget. And I said, well, I'm going to get most of my money from passing the hat anyway, so why don't you just give him half what you're paying me, and he'll come out too, which is, you know, quite a good deal for a booker. Hey, you know, I'll bring this other guy with me and I don't have to pay me any more. And I called Teller and I said, I got a job for you working as a magician in Minnesota. And Teller said, you know, solid. That's all I've ever wanted. And he said, when do we start? And I said, well, we start like, you know, August. And he said, when does it end? And I said, well, the end of September. And he said, I got to be back teaching school then. And I said, oh, okay. See, I thought you were a magician, not a teacher, but never mind. And hung up. And the phone rang about a half hour later. And Teller said, okay, listen, I won't quit my job teaching because I got tenure. I'm not going to do that, but I will take a leave of absence of 1 year and do magic and work with you on that. And I said, solid, let's do that. And what's really funny is the letter of I will take some time off and do magic, and then I'll come back to teaching. Teller still has his copy of that letter. And I think if you read the letter carefully, he will be able to go back and continue teaching at Lawrence High in New Jersey anytime he wants. And Jon Stewart can go back and take that class.
Okay, now the whole routine with him being completely silent and you doing all the talking, how did that develop?
Well, the same way it did with you and me. I'm doing most of the talking. You're just kind of sitting there. No, it actually, I get no credit for that. It predates me. Teller, when he was in college, would do magic at frat parties. And although in rough circumstances, I got louder, faster, and more aggressive, Teller's way of doing it was to just get quiet. And when you're totally quiet, people get sick of heckling you. They just do. And if he did incredibly creepy stuff that was really powerful, people eventually shut up and watched. So we had these two very, very solid ways of working, with Teller silent and me really aggressive and loud. And we started doing stuff together. We were still using our solo material all the time. So we couldn't negate Teller's image in his solo stuff in order to do stuff together. So we kept that. And then over the past 50 years, we've discovered all sorts of positives on that. Two partnerships are out of fashion now, very out of fashion. If in the 50s, if you were to ask about comedy teams, anybody on the street could name probably 6 or 7. There were a lot of them going around. Now, really hard to name one. But most comedy teams, if you watch old reruns of Rowan and Martin on Laugh-In, or Burns and Allen, or Martin and Lewis, or any of those, Allen and Rossi, they're almost always facing partially to each other and partially out. So what the audience is watching is a conversation between the two of them, aware of the audience. So it becomes this make-believe conversation that the audience is watching in on, that then turns every once in a while straight out and addresses the audience. Hi, we're the Smothers Brothers. We're here tonight. This is my brother Dickie, and we're going to do a song. Oh, Tommy, we're going to do a song? Yes, we are. And it goes back and forth, those two things. Teller and I, if you were to, in the comedic structure of it, we're doing a one-man show, one-person show, with just two people. We face straight out all the time. And there are occasional bits where we address each other, but they are rare. In the show, there have been shows that it's 45 minutes into the show before I look at Teller. That he could have his face covered in aluminum foil and I wouldn't notice till 45 minutes into the show. That makes it a very, very different team. And the audience's perception is not that they're watching the relationship between us, but they're watching the relationship with us and them. Not a battle line drawn, but that is where the interchange happens. There have been, out of the 180, 190 magic tricks we've written, there have been maybe 5 where part of the drama rests on the two of us talking to one another, or addressing one another. It's very, very different. I was talking to Tommy Smothers, of the Smothers Brothers, who I miss very much. Tommy and Dickie were heroes of mine when I was a young child. And, the Smothers Brothers aren't well known now. Younger people don't know them, but they are very responsible for a lot of the free speech movement in this country, a lot of the freedom movement, because they were thrown off television for their opposition to the Vietnam War, which is pretty heavy. And they're the ones that brought on some of your very heavy bands that at that time weren't getting on TV. The Smothers Brothers brought on their prime time television show. They a lot of when John Lennon did Give Peace a Chance, Tommy Smothers is playing rhythm guitar. He's in the room. He's in the room and he's playing guitar. Very important to our history, but just not as much in the consciousness right now as I would like them to be. But I was talking to Tommy Smothers, and he was talking about, he said, it's just so fucking brilliant that Teller doesn't talk, because then any interaction you have, the audience has to project upon him what they think he's feeling, and that allows comedy. Whereas when we're doing it, we have to switch off that role, who the audience identifies with. It's just fucking brilliant. And I said, yes, Tommy, it's brilliant and entirely accidental. We did not understand it the way you do until we've been doing it for like 2 years. And then we started going, oh, wait a minute. The audience is seeing us in a different way than most teams. So it's really heartbreaking. In the 80s, I guess, 90s, they came up with this word, codependence. And they slapped that on things. I mean, obviously that's a real problem. I'm not diminishing it. But they slapped it on things that I would rather call friendship, love, and partnership. I mean, the idea that I do better shows with Teller than I could do alone, that's something to celebrate in humanity, and not something to go, ooh, I don't know, they kind of rely on each other. Well, damn Skippy, we fucking rely on each other. That's what a partnership is. And I sometimes worry that it's part of some of the terrible isolation that people feel, that friendship and partnership got labeled codependence. And these, to me, really important sociological ideas are expressed in pop culture. And the absence of teams is kind of bothersome to me.
Now, what happens when Teller goes out in public? Like goes to McDonald's or goes to a restaurant?
Talk to anybody.
Does he talk?
Oh, all the time. As a matter of fact, when we're meeting people or signing autographs or anything like that, he talks to people. And they always go, whoa, you're not supposed to talk. And he goes, fuck you, I'll talk whatever I want. Yeah, we also in the shows, he often talks, but just a line or two or something here or there. I remember when we were first off Broadway, we walked out on stage. It was a small theater, I guess. It was like, I don't know, I should know this, but maybe a couple hundred seats. And we walked out, and Lou Reed was sitting in the audience, like pretty close to the front, so we could see him as we entered. So the first line that night was Teller going, Jesus Christ. Looking out and seeing Lou Reed. So there's something important to say, like we have to react to Lou Reed being in our audience. Teller will talk.